Welcome to this YouTube webinar on dyslexia and languages at second level. My name is Wynne McCormick. The webinar is one in a series of 9 YouTube webinars on dyslexia at second level. However, I recommend to everyone, be they teachers or parents, that they would watch the webinar on how dyslexia affects the student at second level first, and then take any of the others that they would be interested in. I want to stress from the beginning, I'm not a language teacher. My background is as a guidance counsellor and a special education teacher. In this webinar, I want to do two things. One, I want to highlight the resources that are available for language teachers when teaching languages to students with dyslexia. And secondly, to outline the possible difficulties that a student with dyslexia may have when learning languages. I, although not formally identified as being dyslexic, share some of the dyslexic characteristics and found languages particularly difficult. I loved Latin when at school because it was very straightforward, logical, and the phonics used were the same as those in English, since it is a dead language. I learned Irish off by heart for the Leaving Cert. It wasn't until I was supporting special education students as a teacher that I understood that the verb came first in the sentence. Another difficulty were the phonics were different to those in English. So I identify and feel for those students who have similar difficulties. Languages can be a key difficulty for some students. However, it must be said that there are students with dyslexia who can manage languages well, particularly with good oral and oral perception. As with all the webinars, if I mention a particular resource, the link will be given below the YouTube presentation. Here I am referring you to some of the resources on dyslexia and teaching languages. The first one is the book Dyslexia in Secondary School, a practical handbook for teachers, parents and students. It's by Cogan and Flecker. The book is full of practical strategies in general for dyslexia at second level, covering topics such as note-taking, essay writing, etc. But it has 70 wonderful pages on practical help for teaching languages to someone with dyslexia. A very simple strategy they suggest is using pink and blue highlighters for gendered words. The colour will help the student remember the gender. The second book is Dyslexia, Languages and Multilingualism from the British Dyslexia Association by Professor Everett. It's available from the Dyslexia shop in the UK. Next, the University of Lancaster offers an online course for language teachers on teaching languages to students with dyslexia. The link is given. You can see from the details here that over 87,000 teachers have already done it. The second resource is an article from the British Dyslexia Association on foreign language teaching. I'll be referring to this a little later on. Then the Tutor project is for foreign language teachers and training providers. It aims to give foreign language teachers the skills and competency they need to teach effectively foreign languages to students with dyslexia. This is an article in the Ahead Journal by Valerie Haskell from DIT, now TU Dublin. It takes a linguistic perspective on the issue and looks to present scientific facts about language and dyslexia. It says that dyslexia affects language learning in 4 main areas: orthography, the complexity with which a single sound is written and consistency in spelling. Then patterns, the student with dyslexia struggles to recognise patterns and how a word is made up, and also when the word order changes. Becoming automaticity, getting sounds and spellings into long-term memory and being able to use them automatically. Then self-esteem can suffer due to the difficulties encountered. The article then goes on to give advice on choosing a language to study for someone with dyslexia. The last resource is an article from the University of Bath giving 10 tips to unlock the barriers when learning a language with dyslexia. Students with dyslexia can apply for language exemptions. Irish is a compulsory subject in schools. The Circular 55/2022 sets out the criteria for an exemption in Irish. It states that the student must be experiencing significant literacy difficulties across the curriculum and has a standardised score in word reading, reading comprehension or spelling at or below the 10th percentile. It is the school that does the assessment for the exemption. Any exemption granted at primary will carry into secondary, and then also means that the student does not need Irish when applying to the colleges of NUI, which comprise of UCD, Cork, Galway, Maynooth and associated colleges. The study of a third language is not compulsory in Irish secondary schools. However, in some schools it might be a core subject and is not an option. NUI have an entry requirement that students have 6 subjects, 2 at higher level, and include English, Irish and a third language. However, there is some breakdown at the moment in this, as some faculties such as science, engineering and nursing do not require the student to have a third language. If the students have a Department of Education exemption from the study of Irish, they are exempt the Irish requirement. In this case, they can apply and will obtain a third language exemption. If they're not exempt the study of Irish, they can apply for the third language exemption. The criteria, though, is the same as that for the Irish exemption, i.e. the 10th percentile in literacy. Also, Trinity and the University of Limerick have a 2-language requirement, and students can apply for an exemption from that requirement. The 10th percentile in literacy is quite a low criteria. It therefore follows that there are many students with dyslexia who don't meet the criteria for these exemptions. In order to keep all their options open, they may have to study languages. Here I am referring to the PDA article on languages which is linked to. It says, some languages are more problematic for dyslexic learners. Languages such as French and English are less transparent, more opaque than other languages. The relationships between letters and sounds are inconsistent, and the language permits many exceptions and irregularities in pronunciation and spelling. Spanish, Italian and German, on the other hand, are much more transparent languages with clear letter-sound correspondence. It makes reading and spelling easier. Here are some of the difficulties a student with dyslexia may encounter when studying a language. Pronunciation, perception of sounds and phonics, first of all. Auditory and visual perception difficulties can affect the student here. They don't see or hear the difference in sounds. It may have taken them a long time to learn the phonics in English, and now these may be different in the new language. For example, in French, the fact that the last letter is often not pronounced is bewildering. Tenses. It is possible they do not see or hear the segments within a word and are not alert to the roots of words and the various possible endings. They may not know the words to describe the tenses in English and now have to come to terms with learning them in another language. Spelling. They may have spelling difficulties in English. These can multiply when dealing with a different phonics system. Sequencing may be a difficulty for some. For example, they may not remember the sequence of letters of the alphabet, making it hard to look things up in the dictionary. When the sequence of words changes from one language to another, such as in Irish, where the verb comes first, it causes problems. Vocabulary development. It is hard for them to remember new words and to get them into long-term memory. Grammar. They might have already have difficulties with English grammar and now face the challenges of grammar in other languages. Steady building on previous learning. Language learning is like a house of cards. Each lesson builds on what's already learned. This can pose problems. It can be hard to get learning into long-term memory, and therefore they might find it hard to recall the work that they've already done automatically, and therefore are somewhat lost in class. Here are some ideas on what might help. Assessing and pinpointing where the difficulty is and what might help best is a good idea. Cogan and Flecker, in their book, have a good analysis showing how a dyslexic weakness can affect specific tasks when learning languages. They have suggestions about how to identify the particular difficulties of a child, and then, of course, have very practical suggestions on how to help. Patterns in spelling can help. Here's an example of patterns from English and French, where there are many connections between the two languages. If the student can see these connections, it allows them to expand their vocabulary by using this logic rather than learning by rote. I give some examples here. Firstly, where A-I-R-E becomes A-R-Y, adversary becomes adversary, or A-Q-U-E becomes A-C or A-C-K in English, so zodiac becomes zodiac, etc. Of course, logical, structured steps helps the student with dyslexia rather than rote learning where they can have huge problems. Multisensory. If they learn the language by reading and saying and hearing all at the same time, it can help. Repetition and more repetition, so they can become automatic in the use of the words. And then finally, for these students, it's overlearning and hard work. They might have to put more time in, but they can manage it. As I said in the beginning, I'm not a language teacher and so will not go into great detail about the strategies for teaching languages. My key aims are to show the difficulties that the student may have and outline the resources available. I've taken a few ideas from the resources which I would find valuable, and I'm highlighting them in the next 2 or 3 slides. But it is really in the resources themselves that you'll find so many useful and practical ideas. Here for ideas on vocabulary. Have a space on a vocabulary list for a picture of the word so the student can link the image and the word. Have printed vocabulary lists, as the student may find it hard to copy the words, and then their handwriting may be illegible, making it really hard to learn the new words. Topic-based lists help rather than random words. It's more logical. Pink and blue highlighters for gendered words. The colour will be associated with the word and will help with gender. Always using multisensory, so get them to say, see and write when they're learning new words. Regular revision of words is essential. Memory difficulties mean that they can fade from the memory more quickly than for other students. Dictionaries with large print and plenty of space are a good idea, and also, most importantly, with the alphabet printed on every page. This is for the student with dyslexia who does not know the alphabet off by heart. Such dictionaries are available in English and in other languages. If you're using dictionaries that don't have the alphabet on every page, have a bookmark with the alphabet in the dictionary so the student can refer to it. Also, tabs to where every letter begins can help. Again, just some other strategies. Some students may not hear or see the segments within a word. They're not alert to the suffixes and prefixes. Give them a piece of work and ask them to identify the root word, the prefix and the suffix in different colours. Then mnemonics can help with the rules in grammar. For example, bangs, beauty, age, number, good and size can help when deciding the adjectives that come before the verb in French. As I said in the beginning, I hoped to give you some resources on teaching languages to the student with dyslexia and some understanding why they have such difficulties. I hope you found it useful.